Commander Victor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. Earth, the 201st world that would fall to the Zeroth Dominion. He had done this 43 times before. The process was always the same. First, they intercepted the planet's communications. Then they assessed military capabilities. Finally, they deployed the annexation forces. Within 3 cycles, the planet would surrender. Within 10 cycles, its population would be integrated into the Dominion. No species had ever resisted successfully. Commander, his communication officer, called out, "We are receiving the initial data streams from the target world." Vector nodded. "Begin analysis. I want full tactical assessment within 6 hours." The officer's expression changed. His scales shifted from calm blue to confused purple. "Sir, there is something unusual in these transmissions." "Unusual how?" "The inhabitants are broadcasting scenarios that did not happen." Victor moved closer to the officer's station. In his 300 years of military service, he had never heard such a statement. "Explain." The officer brought up a transmission on the screen. It showed humans in strange clothing, speaking to each other. But the audio analysis indicated something strange. The humans were describing events, showing images of explosions and battles. But the biometric data showed they were not distressed. They were entertained. "They are watching themselves in dangerous situations," the officer said. "But they are not in danger. The events are not happening. Yet they react as if they are real." Bacta felt a chill run down his spine. "Are they defective? Is this a species-wide mental illness?" "Unknown, Commander, but it appears intentional. They create these false scenarios deliberately." Over the next several hours, more transmissions flooded into the ship's systems. The Zerathi analysts worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. Humans showed themselves fighting monsters that did not exist. They displayed impossible technologies. They portrayed their own deaths and appeared alive in the next transmission. Junior analyst Kira was the first to notice the pattern. She was young for a Zerathi, only 70 cycles old, and she had studied 47 conquered species. But this was different. "Commander Victor," she said, approaching him carefully, "I request permission to present a theory." Victor looked at the young analyst. Her scales showed the orange of deep thought. "Speak, sir. I believe the humans are not malfunctioning. I believe they are doing something no other known species does. They are creating realities that do not exist, and they know these realities are false, but they engage with them anyway." "That is illogical," Victor said. "Why would any species waste resources on false information?" Kira pulled up multiple transmissions. "Watch this, Commander. In this one, humans portray a scenario where their world is destroyed by climate change. In this one, they show themselves making peace with alien species. In this one, they explore what would happen if their history had been different." Victor watched, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. But these events did not occur. "Exactly, sir. The humans have a word for this. They call it imagination. They call these false scenarios stories, films, books. They create them to explore possibilities, to experience emotions safely, to prepare for futures that may never come." "That is impossible," Victor said. "No species in the galactic record has this ability." "I know, sir. That is what makes this significant." Victor turned away from the screen. His entire military career was based on predictability. Every species followed logical patterns. They communicated truth. They acted on reality. But humans were doing something else entirely. "Send a priority transmission to High Command," he ordered. "Tell them we need guidance. The target species possesses an unknown capability." The message went out through quantum channels, reaching the Dominion capital within minutes. But it did not stay contained. A Talmer spy satellite intercepted the transmission. Within an hour, every major government in the galaxy knew that something strange had been discovered on a small planet called Earth. Back on the flagship, Kira continued her analysis. She watched human transmissions laid into the ship's night cycle. She saw humans cry over characters they knew were not real. She saw them laugh at situations that never happened. She saw them learn lessons from events that existed only in their minds. One transmission caught her attention. It was labeled a documentary, explaining human culture. A human scholar spoke directly to the camera. "Stories are how we make sense of the world," the human said. "They are how we teach our children, how we preserve our history, how we explore our fears, how we dream of better futures. Without stories, we would not be human." Kira played the transmission again and again. The implications were staggering. If humans could imagine things that did not exist, they could innovate in ways other species could not. They could prepare for threats they had never encountered. They could empathize with beings they had never met. She ran to find Commander Victor. He was in the war room speaking with the High Command through holographic projection. "The invasion is postponed," the Supreme Leader was saying. "We must understand this capability before we engage." "Understood, Supreme Leader," Vector replied. "But we should act quickly. If humans realize how unique they are, then they become either our greatest asset or our greatest threat." The Supreme Leader interrupted. "Send a full report. Include all transmissions. The Council will decide." The hologram faded. Victor turned to see Kira standing in the doorway. "Commander," she said quietly, "I think we need to prepare for something." "What?" "The humans have been imagining first contact with aliens for hundreds of their years. They have created thousands of scenarios. Some show peaceful meetings. Others show war. They have been preparing for us, in their own way. For longer than we have been watching them." Vector felt something he had not experienced in decades. Uncertainty, far below. On Earth, a radio telescope in New Mexico picked up an unusual signal. It was brief, barely noticeable, but it was there. Something was in orbit. Something was watching. Dr. Sarah Chen, working the night shift at the observatory, stared at the data on her screen. Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone to call her supervisor. "We are not alone," she whispered to herself. The galaxy was about to change forever. And it all started with a simple question that no one had ever thought to ask before. What if? Earth was marked as the next target, then one transmission. Through the galaxy into chaos, ## Part 2, the literal truth, the Galactic Council chamber had not been this full in 2 centuries. Representatives from 47 species crowded into the massive hall, their various forms of communication creating a chaos of sound, light, and chemical signals. At the center of it all stood junior analyst Kira, a datapad trembling in her hands. To order. The council speaker, a ancient Talmer named Gen Va, projected his voice through the translation matrix. The Zerathi analyst will present her findings. Kira's scales flickered nervous yellow, but she stepped forward. Behind her, a massive holographic display came to life, showing images from Earth. "Honored council members," she began. "I have studied the species of Earth, known as humans, for 3 cycles. What I have discovered challenges everything we understand about intelligence and consciousness." On the screen, a human film played. It showed humans fighting impossible monsters, using weapons that defied physics, traveling through time. The council watched in confused silence. "This species broadcasts false information?" asked a Vrin representative, his tentacles curling in confusion. "Is this a defense mechanism? A form of psychological warfare?" "No, honored Vrin," Kira replied. "They do this for something they call entertainment and education. They create elaborate scenarios they know are not real, and they experience emotions about these false events. They call it fiction, imagination, storytelling." The chamber erupted in noise. Several species began arguing at once. The concept was too alien, too strange. Commander Victor, standing at the back of the chamber, watched the chaos unfold. He had spent the last week reviewing thousands of human transmissions. He had watched humans cry over characters who never existed. He had seen them learn moral lessons from events that never happened. He still did not fully understand it, but he knew Kira was right. This changed everything. Gen Vei commanded. Analyst Kira explained the practical implications of this ability. Kira took a deep breath. Humans can simulate scenarios in their minds. They can experience outcomes without risk. When they face a problem, they can imagine multiple solutions and test them mentally. They can empathize with beings they have never met by imagining themselves in that being's position. They can prepare for dangers they have never encountered by creating fictional versions of those dangers. She pulled up another image. It showed human children sitting in a circle listening to an adult read from a book. They teach their young using stories. Not just facts and history, but elaborate false scenarios designed to teach lessons. Their children learn right from wrong, bravery from cowardice, wisdom from foolishness, all through events that never happened. A Korath diplomat, her crystalline form pulsing with light, spoke up. This is dangerous. If they can believe in things that are not real, how can we trust any communication from them? How do we know when they are telling truth? That is the remarkable part, Kira said. They know the difference. They have clear markers for fiction versus reality. They can separate the two. They choose when to engage with imagination and when to engage with truth. Ambassador Velen of the Talmar Collective floated forward. He was one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, having witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. His voice was grave. In all my years, across all my studies, I have never encountered a species with this capability. Every known intelligent species operates on observable reality. We can problem solve, we can adapt, we can learn, but we cannot create realities that do not exist. We cannot believe in the unreal while knowing it is unreal. He turned to face the full council. If humans can imagine possibilities, they can innovate in ways we cannot. They can conceive of technologies that do not yet exist. They can prepare for threats that have not yet appeared. They can understand perspectives they have never experienced. The Zerathi Supreme Leader, watching via hologram from the Dominion capital, spoke for the first time. Then they are a threat that must be eliminated or controlled immediately. Or, Velen countered, they are the greatest asset the galaxy has ever encountered.
Oh.
The chamber fell silent. This was the question that had divided governments across the stars. In the past week, since news of Earth's unusual ability had spread, the galaxy had fractured into factions. Some wanted to quarantine Earth. Others wanted to conquer it. A few wanted to learn from it. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a hastily assembled UN committee. The mysterious signal had been confirmed by 6 other observatories. Something was watching them. Something big. We need to prepare for contact, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. We have been imagining this moment for generations. Every science fiction story, every first contact scenario we have ever created, it was all preparation for this. The UN Secretary General, an elderly man named James Park, looked skeptical. Dr. Chen, those are just stories. This is real, sir. Stories are how we practice for reality. We have imagined peaceful first contact. We have imagined hostile invasion. We have imagined everything in between. We may not have the technology of our science fiction, but we have the mental frameworks. We know how to think about this. She pulled up a screen showing various human depictions of alien contact. Look at this. Hundreds of scenarios. Thousands of possibilities. We have been preparing for this moment without even knowing it. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, Kira was presenting her final recommendation. I propose we make formal contact with Earth. We send a delegation. We speak with their imagination specialists and try to understand this capability. Impossible, the Supreme Leader said. If we reveal ourselves, we give away our strategic advantage. Supreme Leader Kira replied, her scales flashing bold orange. Humans already know something is watching them. Their detection systems have found our fleet. We either make formal contact, or we confirm every hostile alien scenario they have ever imagined. Vector stepped forward. I support the analyst's recommendation. As military commander, I have reviewed human warfare scenarios. They have imagined weapons and tactics that do not exist in our databases. If we approach them with hostility, they will draw upon thousands of fictional battle plans. We cannot predict their response because they can imagine options we cannot. The debate raged for hours. Finally, a vote was called. The result was narrow, but clear. A delegation would be sent to Earth, They would request a meeting with human imagination specialists. The Talmar would lead the mission with observers from the Zerathi Korath and 3 other species. But as the council adjourned, a separate message was being sent through encrypted channels. A radical faction within the Zerathi military, loyal to the old Supreme Leader's hardline policies, had a different plan. They did not want to understand humans. They wanted to eliminate them before this imagination capability could spread in a hidden military station on the edge of Dominion space. Commander Thaxel received his orders. He read them twice, his scales turning cold gray. Then he turned to his crew, prepared the assault fleet. We launch for Earth in 2 cycles. Our mission is simple. The humans are a disease that will infect the galaxy. We end them before they can teach others to dream. On Earth, Sarah Chen stood at her window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, something was coming. She did not know if they came in peace or war, but she knew one thing with certainty. Humanity had been practicing for this moment in every story they had ever told. Now it was time to find out if imagination was enough to save them. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when reality finally met imagination. Earth was marked as the next target, then one transmission. Through the galaxy into chaos Part 3, the ambassador's gambit. Ships appeared over Earth on a Tuesday morning. 6 vessels, each representing a different species, materialized in high orbit. They were beautiful and terrifying, gleaming in the sunlight. Technology far beyond anything humanity had achieved. Every screen on Earth showed the same image. Every radio carried the same message in dozens of languages. People of Earth, we come in peace. We request diplomatic contact. We have much to discuss. Within hours, the UN had assembled a team at a secure facility in Geneva. But this was not the diplomatic team anyone had expected. Instead of presidents and generals, the room contained Dr. Sarah Chen, a novelist who had written first contact scenarios. Next to her sat Marcus Webb, a film director famous for science fiction movies. Across from them was Jennifer Park, a game designer who created complex narrative experiences. The final member was Dr. Rashid Okoy, a child psychologist who studied how children learn through stories. "I do not understand why we are here," Marcus said, looking around the room. "Should we not have politicians handling this?" Sarah shook her head. "They specifically asked for imagination specialists. That is us." The alien delegation arrived in a shuttle that seemed to bend light around it. When they stepped out, humanity got its first look at extraterrestrial life. The Talmor ambassador Velen floated on anti-gravity technology, his crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. Commander Vector of the Zerothi stood tall, his scales shifting colors. 3 other species, equally alien and magnificent, completed the delegation. The first meeting was awkward. The aliens studied the humans with obvious fascination. The humans tried not to stare. Translation technology handled language, but understanding was harder. Velen spoke first, his voice like wind chimes. "We have come to understand something about your species. Something unique in the known galaxy. You want to know about imagination?" Sarah said. It was not a question. "Yes, we have studied your transmissions. We see that you create scenarios you know are false. You experience emotions about events that never occurred. You learn from experiences you never had. We do not understand how this is possible." Marcus leaned forward. "You have never told stories? Never created fiction?" Vactor's scales flickered confused purple. "We record history. We document reality. We communicate facts. But creating false information deliberately? No species does this. No species can do this." Jennifer spoke up. "But how do you explore possibilities? How do you test ideas before implementing them?" "We use logic. We calculate probabilities. We run simulations based on known data," a Korath representative answered, her crystalline form pulsing. "But we cannot create data that does not exist." Dr. Okoy, who had been quiet until now, smiled gently. "Let me show you something simple." He pulled out a children's book. It was old and worn, clearly loved. "This is a story about a rabbit who was afraid of the dark. The rabbit learns to be brave by making friends with the creatures of the night. My daughter loved this book. He opened it, showing pictures of a cartoon rabbit. Now, tell me, Ambassador Velen, do rabbits talk? No, Velen replied. Do they wear clothes and live in houses? No. So this story is false. Incorrect. Not real. Yes. But when my daughter was afraid of the dark, this false story taught her to be brave. She learned a real lesson from a fake rabbit. How is that possible in your understanding? The aliens were silent. Their various forms of expression all showed the same thing: confusion. Sarah decided to take a risk. Let me tell you a story. Right here, right now. Just listen. She took a breath and began. Once, there was an alien who traveled far from home. He was lonely, because no one in his travels could understand him. One day he met a creature who was very different from him. They could not speak the same language. They did not share the same culture, but they both looked up at the stars and felt the same wonder. They became friends, teaching each other about their worlds. And the alien was never lonely again. As Sarah spoke, something remarkable happened. The translation technology carried not just her words, but the emotion in her voice. Velena's crystalline body began to pulse with a color the humans had not seen before. Vector's scales shifted through patterns that seemed almost rhythmic. When she finished, Velen spoke quietly. That story, it did not happen. No. But I felt something. A sensation in my consciousness, like longing and then fulfillment. For a being that does not exist, yes, Sarah said gently, that is empathy through imagination. You just experienced emotion about a false scenario. You just imagined. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Vector stood abruptly, his scales flashing bright red. This is dangerous. If we can believe in things that are not real, how do we maintain truth? How do we separate fact from fiction? The same way we always have, Marcus said. We know the difference. When I make a movie about space battles, everyone knows it is not real. But we can still learn from it. We can still feel from it. We can still enjoy it. But what if others cannot tell the difference? A Zirathi observer demanded. What if this ability spreads and corrupts other species? Jennifer stood up. You are already experiencing it. Ambassador Velen felt emotion from Sarah's story. The question is not whether imagination can spread. The question is what you do with it. Velena's form pulsed thoughtfully. We must report this to the Galactic Council. This changes everything. The humans have offered to share their cultural database. Millions of stories, films, books, games, all their fictional works. Perhaps if we study them, we can understand. Wait, Doctor, Okoye said. Before you do that, you need to understand something important. Imagination is powerful. It can teach, inspire, and bring joy. But it can also manipulate, frighten, and mislead. You need to approach this carefully. You understand caution, Vector said stiffly. I do not think you do, Sarah said quietly. You have never experienced horror fiction. You have never felt fear from a story. You have never had nightmares about fictional monsters. This is not just about positive emotions. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. A UN security officer rushed into the room, his face pale. We have a situation. Multiple Zirathi warships just entered the solar system. They are not part of the diplomatic mission. They are powering weapons. Vector's scales flashed shock white. That is impossible. The invasion was postponed. Commander Velen said urgently, could there be a faction that did not agree with the Council's decision? Vector was already accessing his communication device. His expression darkened as he read the incoming data. Commander Thaxel, a radical. He believes imagination is a disease that will destroy the galaxy. He has gone rogue with an entire assault fleet. Akas looked at Sarah. Well, this is exactly like every hostile first contact story we have ever written, except Sarah said, her mind racing. We have written those stories. We have imagined this scenario. We have explored thousands of ways it could play out. She turned to Velen. You want to understand imagination? You are about to see it in action. because humanity has been preparing for hostile first contact for over a century. We may not have your technology, but we have something else. We have practiced this moment in our minds 1,000 times. Overhead, the rogue Zirathi fleet moved into attack formation. On Earth, military forces scrambled. The diplomatic team looked at each other, and in that moment, humans and aliens alike realized the same thing. Imagination was about to go to war with reality, and no one knew which would win. Earth was marked as the next target, then one transmission. Through the galaxy into chaos Part 4. Stories as weapons. The Zarathi assault fleet hung above Earth like a sword waiting to fall. 30 warships, each capable of reducing a city to ash in seconds. Commander Thaxel watched Earth on his view screen, his scales a determined gray. "Begin the attack," he commanded. "Target their military installations first. Make it quick." On Earth, Sarah Chen stood in an emergency command center that had been built in Geneva. Around her, military leaders from every nation coordinated defense systems that everyone knew were inadequate. General Morrison of the United States military looked at the tactical display and shook his head. "We have maybe 2 hours before they break through our orbital defenses. Our weapons are decades behind theirs." "Then we do not fight them with weapons," Sarah said. Everyone turned to look at her. "Explain?" Morrison demanded. "You heard what analyst Kira said? Their AI systems are logical. They operate on observable reality. They have never encountered imagination." Sarah's hands moved quickly across a tablet. "Marcus, Jennifer, I need you both. Now." The film director and game designer rushed over. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked. "We flood them with stories. All of them. Everything humanity has ever created. We overwhelm their systems with imagination." Oh. Jennifer's eyes widened. "Their AI will try to analyze it as threat data. They will try to process every scenario as a real possibility." "Exactly." "We hit them with every science fiction story, every fantasy epic, every horror tale, every adventure we have ever written. We make their computers imagine." Velen floated closer, his crystalline form pulsing rapidly. "This is unprecedented, but it might work. Their military AI is designed to calculate all possible threats and prepare countermeasures. If you feed it fictional threats, it will try to prepare for dragons, zombies, time travel, magic, superheroes, and 1,000 impossible things," Sarah finished. "It will drown in hypotheticals." Commander Vaector, who had been coordinating with his loyalist forces in orbit, joined them. "I have 12 ships that will fight against Thaxel, but we are outnumbered. If your plan fails, we all die." "It will work," Sarah said, with more confidence than she felt. "Jennifer, can you coordinate with the tech teams? We need every streaming service, every library database, every archive, everything on it." Jennifer was already making calls. Within 30 minutes, an unprecedented transmission began broadcasting from Earth. It was not a message of surrender or defiance. It was stories. Thousands of them, millions of them, all at once. On board Thaxel's flagship, the tactical AI received the data stream and immediately began analysis. This was standard protocol. Analyze all enemy communications for threats, weaknesses, tactical information. But this was not normal data. The AI processed a story about humans developing faster than light travel through a method called hyperdrive. It calculated the physics. Impossible. But the transmission treated it as real. The AI created contingency plans anyway, as it was programmed to do. Then came another story about humans who could move objects with their minds. Also impossible. But what if? The AI began calculations, then zombies, then time travel, then shapeshifters, then parallel universes, then gods who walked among mortals, then machines that achieved consciousness, then humans who turned into giant monsters, then magic systems with complex rules, then faster computers that could predict the future. The AI's processing power was immense, but it had limits. It was designed to prepare for realistic threats. Now it was trying to prepare for impossible things, and its programming could not tell the difference between a clever tactic and pure fiction. Commander Thaxel, tactical officer, called out, his scales showing confused purple. The AI is reporting millions of potential threat scenarios from Earth. Millions. That is impossible. They barely have spaceflight. Sir, the scenarios include weapons we have never encountered, threats that violate known physics, tactical situations that make no logical sense. On another ship, a weapons officer watched in confusion as his targeting systems began showing error messages. The AI was trying to calculate defense against fictional weapons and overloading. Sir. My systems are requesting clarification on how to defend against something called a Death Star. What is a Death Star? According to the transmission, it is a moon-sized battle station that can destroy planets. But Earth does not have one. The transmission shows it as a story from something called Star Wars. Across the fleet, similar conversations were happening. AI systems designed for war were being fed imagination. They could not process the difference. On Earth, Dr. Okoye watched the data feed with fascination. It is working. Look at this. Their communication networks are flooding with requests for clarification. Their systems are trying to verify if these scenarios are real. Now, Marcus pulled up a monitoring screen. We are hitting them with everything. Ancient myths, modern science fiction, fantasy epics, horror stories. Their computers are trying to prepare battle plans against fictional enemies. In orbit, Commander Victor watched the rogue fleet's formation begin to deteriorate. They are losing coordination. Their AI network is compromised. But Thaxel was not giving up. Shut down the AI networks. Switch to manual control. We do not need computers to destroy these primitives. His crew moved to comply. But something unexpected happened. During the brief time the AI systems were processing human fiction, they had distributed some of that data to crew stations for verification. Zerathi soldiers, trained to follow logic and orders without question, found themselves reading human stories. A young weapons officer named Kethel stared at his screen. It showed a human story about a soldier who questioned his orders, who chose mercy over duty, who became a hero by refusing to follow commands he knew were wrong. Kethel had never imagined such a scenario. His entire life was service to the Dominion. But now, for just a moment, he imagined himself making a different choice. He imagined being someone who chose compassion over conquest. His hand hesitated over the firing control across the fleet. Similar moments were happening. Zerathi crew members were experiencing something they had never felt before. Doubt, questions, imagination. Commander Thaxel, a communication officer, said quietly, I am receiving messages from other ships. Some crew members are questioning the mission. Possible. Zerathi do not question orders. They are, sir. They are reading the human transmissions. They are imagining alternatives. Thaxel's scales flashed furious red. This is exactly why these humans are dangerous. They are infecting us with their madness. All ships fire immediately. But on 12 ships, crew members made a choice they had never made before. They imagined a different path. They refused. Commander Victor saw the opening. All loyalist forces moved to intercept. Protect Earth. Space above Earth erupted into chaos. Zerathi ships fired on each other. Some followed Thaxel's orders. Others, for the first time in their existence, chose differently because they had imagined a better way. On Earth, Sarah watched the battle unfold on the screens. What have we done? She whispered. You gave them imagination, Velen said softly, and now they must learn what every human knows. That imagination brings both wonder and responsibility, creation and destruction, hope and fear. In the middle of the battle, a new fleet arrived. The Talmar Collective's peacekeeping forces, massive and powerful. They positioned themselves between the fighting ships. All vessels cease fire immediately, came the broadcast. The Galactic Council has issued an emergency decree. Earth is under collective protection. Any species that attacks Earth will face the full force of the Council. Slowly, the fighting stopped. Thaxel's remaining loyal ships retreated. Vector S forces stood down. The crisis was over, but the galaxy had changed. Humanity had defended itself, not with weapons, but with stories. And in doing so, they had given the gift of imagination to species that had never known it existed. The question now was whether the galaxy could handle what humans had unleashed. Earth was marked as the next target, then one transmission. Through the galaxy, into chaos, Part 5, the new Galaxy 3. Months after the battle, Earth looked different. Alien ships still filled the orbit, but they were not warships. They were university vessels, research stations, diplomatic cruisers. The planet that was supposed to be the Zirathi Dominion's 201st conquest had become the galaxy's first school of imagination. Sarah Chen walked through the campus of the newly established Institute for Imaginative Studies in Geneva. Students from 20 different species filled the halls, though calling them students was generous. Most still struggled with even the most basic concepts of fiction. She entered her classroom to find her usual group waiting. A young Talmar named Zenra, whose crystalline body pulsed with eager yellow light. 2 Zirathi soldiers from Vector's reformed faction. A Korath scientist whose curiosity had overcome her people's general fear of imagination. And, most surprisingly, a handful of former crew members from Thaxel's fleet who had defected during the battle. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah said, placing her materials on the desk. "Today, we are going to try something difficult. We are going to write." Nervous energy rippled through the room. They had spent weeks studying human stories. They had analyzed narrative structure, character development, conflict resolution, but creating was different from analyzing. "I want each of you to write 1 paragraph," Sarah continued. "It does not need to be complex. Just describe something that did not happen. Something you wish had happened, or fear might happen, or simply wonder about." Zenra's form pulsed with confused purple. "But how do we create information that does not exist? Our minds do not work that way." "They do now," Sarah said gently. "You felt emotion during the story I told 3 months ago. You imagined that lonely alien and his friend? That was the first step. Now you take the next step. You create." For an hour, the room was silent, except for the sound of various species struggling with their writing implements. Sarah walked among them, offering encouragement, answering questions that often had no clear answers. Finally, Zenra raised a tentative appendage. "I have written something, but I do not know if it is correct." "There is no correct in imagination," Sarah said. "May I read it?" Zenra's paragraph was simple, almost childlike. It described a Talmor who traveled to a planet made entirely of crystals, where every thought created music. The Talmar danced with the planet, and the music was beautiful. "This is wonderful," Sarah said, and she meant it. "You created something that does not exist. You imagined." Zenra's entire form flashed bright gold, a color Sarah had learned meant joy. "I felt something while writing it, like I was there. On the crystal planet, even though I know it is not real, that," Sarah said, "is the magic of imagination." Across the city, in a military briefing room, Commander Vector met with representatives from the reformed Zirathi government. The Dominion had fractured after the battle. The old Supreme Leader's hardline faction still existed, but it was weakened, isolated. Vector now led a coalition that wanted something the Dominion had never pursued before: understanding instead of conquest. "The Council is requesting a report on our progress," his aide said. Vector pulled up a holographic display. It showed data from across the galaxy. Imagination is spreading. 17 species now have citizens studying at Earth's institutes. 8 species have reported individuals creating their first original fictional works. The Talmar have established 3 universities dedicated to imagination studies, and the opposition. The aide asked. 40% of known governments have banned human cultural content. They call it dangerous, corrupting. "They may be right, sir." Vector turned to look at his aide. "I have been writing stories. At night, when no one is watching, I write about a soldier who found a better path than war. It is clumsy, simple, but it is mine." Scale shifted to vulnerable blue. "And I find I can no longer imagine myself as I was before. I question orders now. I consider alternatives. I wonder about possibilities. I am less efficient as a soldier, but I think I am becoming a better being. In another part of Geneva, Dr. Okoye watched as children from both Earth and several alien species played together in a park. They were acting out a story, one they had created together. A human child was pretending to be an alien explorer. A young Korath was playing a human scientist. They were imagining together, creating shared narratives. "This is the real revolution," he said to Jennifer Park, who stood beside him. "Not the adults learning to write stories. The children growing up thinking this is normal." Jennifer nodded. "We are changing the galaxy, one bedtime story at a time." A message came through on Okoye's communicator. He read it, and his expression shifted to surprise. "You need to see this." He went to the communications center, where a transmission was being analyzed. It came from the far edge of known space, from a region that had just been explored. "We have made contact with a new species," the communications officer explained. "They call themselves the Vayanar, and look at what they sent us." On the screen appeared images, sounds, stories. A species humanity had never met before was sharing their cultural database, and it was full of fiction. Myths, legends, created scenarios. Another species that could imagine. "They are not human," the officer said, wonder in his voice. "They evolved imagination independently. They have been creating stories for thousands of years." Sarah was called to the center immediately. When she saw the transmission, tears filled her eyes. "We are not alone," she whispered. The news spread through the Institute within hours. Another imaginative species existed. The implications were staggering. If two species had evolved this ability independently, how many more might be out there? That evening, Sarah stood before her class one last time before the term break. The students had changed in 3 months. They were not masters of imagination, but they were no longer purely logical beings either. They questioned, they wondered, they dreamed. "Before you leave," Sarah said, "I want to tell you one more story. This one is true." She described the journey of the last 3 months. The battle, the fear, the hope. She talked about Victor finding his voice as a writer, about Zenra creating the crystal planet, about children of different species playing together, creating shared stories. "When your people first found Earth," she said, "you saw us as primitive, as targets for conquest or subjects for study. But we had something you did not. Not better technology or stronger bodies. Just the ability to ask 2 simple words. What if?" She looked at each student. "Now you can ask those words too. What if there is a better way? What if we can change? What if we can be more than we are?" Those questions, that imagination, that is what will reshape the galaxy. Zinra's form pulsed thoughtfully. "Teacher Sarah, I have been wondering something. If humans have been imagining alien contact for hundreds of years, and you prepared for this moment through your stories, does that mean your stories predicted the future?" Sarah smiled. "No, Zenra. Our stories did not predict the future. They created it. We imagined so many possibilities that when reality finally arrived, we were ready for it. That is the real power of imagination. It does not tell you what will happen. It prepares you for what might happen." As the class ended and the students filed out, Sarah looked through the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vayanar were waiting to make contact. Somewhere out there, other imaginative species might exist, creating their own stories, dreaming their own dreams. The galaxy had been shaped by logic, by mathematics, by observable reality for millions of years. Now it would be shaped by something else, by dreams and stories, by questions and possibilities, by the simple act of